There he is.
It's time for
Whoa!
Well, that was startling, wasn't it? Don't forget, like, share, do the whole thing. A bunch of people shared our discussion yesterday. It's a great way to help spread the word about what's happening here
Thank you.
on this
Guys
year's
are the
show.
best.
And it's also a great way to just spread the word about Moody Radio. Start great discussions on your page. Remember, hearts and smiley faces for me. Wild and angry faces for
Brian,
No.
there's a point where the jokes get old.
Wow.
There's a point when jokes get old. My wife tells me that every day.
Every day.
Every day.
So today there's a good one here because I've always wanted to be in a position where I could say, Harvard Business Review. Well, I was looking at Harvard Business Review and it was inherently flawed.
You sound smart. Just that.
Doesn't
You
that
can
sound
stop
smart?
there, yeah.
Just saying I was reading Harvard Business Review makes it sound like I intentionally did this.
Yeah.
No, it popped up in my social media feed.
Yeah.
So the article, 8 questions to ask someone other than, so what do you do? Okay? So here's the premise of the whole thing. We've all been in the awkward situation of meeting someone new and having to build rapport quickly at networking events, industry conferences, charity events, dinners. Yeah, right? Yes?
Yep.
And if you're like many people, especially most Americans, you get the awkward silence. It's like, hey, I'm Brian. Hi, nice to meet you. You know, who are you? Great.
Then you just stand there. Yeah, weird.
And now you need to do something. So what do? You break the silence with, so what do you do? And what they're saying here is that that's a horrible way to break the ice for lots of reasons. One of them, because science says to build true networking, you need multiple layers of connection, not just one. And so they say, don't ask that question, and they offer a whole lot of other questions you could ask instead.
Okay.
Janelle was inspired by this. Janelle, take it away before I say why this is all wrong.
Okay. I actually agree. Well, I can see the point of we need to ask more than what do you do?
Right.
But I think it depends on why you're asking that question. So first on the why we shouldn't. I think overall our culture, we've let what we do for a living define who we are.
Yeah.
And a lot of times it's sizing people up. I feel like it's quietly you're sizing people up. Or being transparent here, being Janelle, I think even with the stay-at-home community, a lot of it's like, what does your husband do? You can kind of size up like what neighborhoods do you live in. It sounds so whack, but it gives you an idea of like where you at. It's like a weird thing. I have an issue with that. For me, in my experience, it's been let's say I'll go to, I was at the JCC one time and I have a bunch of kids. I got 6 kids. And when people would ask me that when they met me at the J, I felt like sometimes it would be like, how can you afford being here? Or how can you afford staying at home? Like a lot of times they'll be like, oh, you have a lot of kids. What does your husband do for a living? And I'll be like, really? Like, what does it matter?
Yeah.
Like my kids are here, we're fine. I don't like it that way. Now, I've asked it, and I know there are people out there that ask it because of real curiosity. I think what you do for a living is something you do 8 hours a day, all day long. And it does talk a little bit about who you are. It makes you interesting. So if it's for good reasons, I don't see why that can't be a good conversation starter. Not so much what level. Are you a manager? Like, not that stuff. Like, what projects do you do? I like that question.
Yeah, but it always, to get to the projects and stuff, it starts with what do you do for a living? And it's usually I sling boxes at UPS, or I am a neurosurgeon at Cleveland Clinic, or I drive around in a golf cart giving orders all day.
Yeah.
Len Doubles.
Yeah.
But there's always some, I'm a manager at this place.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it really, during the stages in my life where I was unemployed or underemployed, I always hated the anticipation that, oh, I'm going to go somewhere with new people. They're going to ask me, what do I do for a living? And I'm going to say, well, right now I'm delivering pizzas, or I'm, whatever it might be. And I feel that sizing up in anticipation. I pre-worry about it. It's like, yeah, I'm going to look stupid. Like, you're 40 years old. Why are you driving around with pizzas?
Would it would it be crazy for me to say if I met you at a Starbucks and you said, "Oh, I work for UPS," I would be like, "Oh my gosh, how does it feel like it's like all your boxes from Amazon?" I think that's
weird. I think that's
interesting.
normal. By the way, hi Callie. What's
Hi,
up,
guys.
Kelly Ann? Thanks for coming in. What's up,
I just realized
Robert? Agreeing with Janelle. Thanks a lot, Robert.
that.
Yeah, we're hanging out, and you're saying
Smart
Janelle.
people in the house.
Benny, I don't know if I've seen Benny Mosley
No.
Jr. before. Benny, what's up, man? Thanks for coming
Hey,
in. We're great. No, you're great, Benny.
Yeah.
you're great.
Thank you for your kind words.
No, well,
about the
I'll
topic
take
this
that,
morning.
Benny. Thank you. I'm great.
No, he's talking to me. Tamara's back. My wife's
Right.
here.
Whoa.
Better straighten up.
Yeah, Sarah in the
Can
house.
I tell you
She's got
why?
a black belt.
She does have a
She
black belt.
does.
Watch out. She's rolling her eyes right now. I got to tell you why. You're partially there in my inherent flaw in this concept. Again, this article.
So am I on the right side or on the wrong
Can I
side?
guess?
You're on your way. Go ahead.
The inherent flaw is that you would even go somewhere where you have to talk to people.
Wow.
Yeah. Who are you to think that I have to meet people? No. Okay, so
Are they breaking into my house?
they hate the question, "What do you do?" Right? They're assuming it's a
Yeah.
bad question. It's not a bad question, and you've hinted at the reason why it could be a good question.
No, it could be a bad question.
It could be a bad question
Yeah.
if you're sizing up somebody else. If it's a
Yeah.
competition, obviously that's
Or
bad.
trying to justify something. I
But-
don't need to tell you what I do or what my husband does for
That's
you to justify, "Oh, okay, it's okay for you to have that amount of kids." What?
No, that's absolutely
That's
right.
whack. Yeah.
Lots of other questions could do the very same thing and have the same outcome.
Yeah.
Oh, where do you live?
Right.
Oh, I live in. Oh, you live there? Like suddenly you're sizing up, right?
What school did you go to?
What's good?
Ah.
Exactly. That becomes sizing up.
Yeah.
Now, the inherent flaw in the idea of what do you do is a bad question is that they forget the whole premise is based on the fact that it's become a question that really nobody cares what the answer is.
Really? I don't care.
It's like now,
That's
I know you do,
interesting.
but to be honest, in all love, you're weird. So like when you're walking down the hall, you see somebody you know. Hey, what's up? Do you really want to know what's up?
Oh yeah.
No.
If someone stopped and said, actually, right now my shoulder kind of hurts from yesterday and I slept funny in here and I'm feeling kind of sad because
No. Change the setting. If I'm walking down the hall, that's one thing. If I'm sitting at Starbucks, let's say you're sitting at a park bench.
yeah.
You really have the time. You do care if it's like, "Hey, what's up?" If somebody told me, "Oh my gosh, the kids are tripping today," really, and that would start a
But
conversation.
most people when they say, hey, what's up or hey, how you doing? They don't care.
They don't.
It's like saying, hi.
They don't even wait for the
Right.
answer. Really, yeah.
They don't want the answer. They don't
Yeah.
wait for the answer to keep going. And I think what do you do is a mode for somebody else to honestly tell you what they do.
Right.
That's their motive.
But,
They go, quick, tell me your answer to what you do so I can tell you what I do. If you
Oh,
were actually
yeah.
interested in the answer, I think it could actually generate great discussion. Like you said, that's
Yeah.
the perfect question to ask. Somebody goes, hey, I work at UPS. You go, okay, seriously, Amazon, is that like all of your work?
yeah.
Do you know?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you're actually asking a question, being interested in what they do. You
Yeah.
can learn a lot of information if you just simply ask somebody questions about what they do. It doesn't mean that they're defined by what they do. And this I don't know if this happens to you, but it happens to me all the time where I actually don't like the sizing up thing. And I think there's a lot of other jobs that are way cooler than ours. But ours seem to sound fun to everybody.
Right.
Like being in radio seems like it'd be really fun, right? I think it's compelling when you're a surgeon, when you're an architect, when you're
Yeah.
an office manager. I think those things are really interesting. And so I try to avoid telling people what I do. Do you guys ever do that?
Yeah.
Because it leads to a lot more questions, and I don't like the focus on me.
It gets
Right.
weird. And so to prove my point, what happens is people say, oh, what do you do? I go, I work in media. And they go, oh, okay. And they keep going. Or I'll say, I work at a radio station. And they go, okay, well, I actually do like if I were to say host a morning show, typically people want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But rarely does anyone ask me any follow-up questions to find out what I do. Rarely. And I try to make it a game to see how hard can I make you work to find out.
So
Because
I
people
was-
don't care.
So maybe that's not the real problem. First, I wanted to say I'm going somewhere. Callie wants you to say hi to her son Patrick. So can we give him a big ups? What's
Woo,
up?
Patrick.
Patrick!
This is for you in particular. Can you say?
It's for
Well,
Patrick?
all of us. But she said
Yeah.
Brian.
Brian, can you please say hello to my son
He might
Patrick?
be.
Patrick, how are you, man? Good to see you. Was that weird? I don't know.
No, that was good.
It was
Yes.
good.
Jennifer says, yes, I find people asking it too if you're a homeschooler. It's often under the guise of, how do you afford to stay home and how are you smart enough to do that? I've had people ask me that.
That's so
I
rude.
homeschool my kids. Did you go to school for, did you go to school for that? And it's
and
a
you
little...
want to say, look, it's not 1980. There's a lot of programs around.
Yeah, and I don't have to. It's past curiosity. It's a little bit of, do you do what I think you should do to qualify to do what you do, or to have the kids you have, or to live where you live?
I'm
What
sorry.
are you laughing at?
Benny says, hey Brian, hey Janelle, hey Ronicus.
Right,
That was from
kids. Yeah.
yesterday's Bible Brainbusters.
Yeah.
Stephanie says, not necessarily. It is,
Very well.
after all, what consumes the biggest chunk of a person's time.
Yeah.
Good follow-ups are always, what do you like about your job? What was the best thing that happened
Yes.
there this week then? Stephanie, this is kind of where I was going with you. So maybe it's not the questions we're asking. Maybe is, do we really have true, genuine curiosity about people? Are we really good listeners? Like, first of all, we're not. And why? Because we're not really curious about people. Do you think that's the issue? Any
Yes.
question, because it could be, why do you homeschool? Or why, in my case, the questions that bother me, or where does your husband work? If it was about, I'm curious about you. What country did you come from? I would take that all day long. It's about, are you curious about the person?
And see, this is why you can find the gospel in everything. And here's where you find the gospel in this. Doesn't this all go back to loving your neighbor? We're supposed to love God and love our neighbor. The whole thing's summed up in that. And then later on, Paul writes that we're supposed to think of others as more important than ourselves.
Right.
And if we truly fulfill those things, it's even in situations as simple as this. Harvard Business Review is wrong. It's not that you shouldn't ask someone what they do. You should actually care about the answer.
Yeah.
And you should actually try to figure out something about the person. In fact, here's an exercise. See how long you can talk about them without talking about you.
Yeah.
Ooh,
I like that because then it takes the focus off me.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Keep talking. I understand
Andre, what's up? I have not seen your name. He says on average, most of the population in the U.S. spends a third of their day at work. It's kind of hard not to
Yeah.
talk about work.
So why is there this thing where there's an aversion to talking about what you do? It's because we're afraid we'll be defined by what we do? Is that the fear?
And
Yeah, that's a problem if you're defined. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
I was just gonna say, if you're a doctor, you're at a party, you say, what do you do? I'm a doctor. Oh, well, I've got this rash.
Yes.
You know, you get the weird
That's what I'm
questions.
saying.
Yeah.
So I
You
can
know-
understand them being like, no, I'm in the medical field.
Yeah, would you just check this out for 2 seconds? I think it's,
Yeah, come over here quick. Yeah,
I do have an issue with being defined by what we do. But it depends
wanna
what we
challenge
mean by defined.
yes, it does.
Depends what we mean by defined.
Because
For example, me telling someone, which is usually what I've done in the past, I'm a homeschooler and I stop there, shouldn't change how we engage if I told you, oh yeah, I'm a mechanical engineer. And it does. And that's whack.
It is.
But
Crack is whack, too.
But it depends. It is.
That's one of my favorite Whitney Houston quotes.
Oh my gosh. But it depends what we mean. It depends by what we mean by define. So
It does. So what do we mean
Go
by
ahead.
that? Because, how about this one? God has called you to have a radio show. Should you be ashamed of the calling? And doesn't it somewhat define you? That God has called you to do this. People who could be working at UPS could be called to do that by the Lord, to do it with all their effort. Should we be ashamed that God has put us in that place at that time? So what does it mean to, the answer is obviously no. So how is it unhealthy to be defined by what you do?
I think it depends. Okay, so if I was talking to Len Neville's, my husband, he more than I, he would say he does not like that. Defining himself by what he does. He's like, I do what I do, it's my job. He would say what defines me more is I'm a dad. And I know that sounds corny, but he's
Yeah,
so
he's
much
corny.
like that. He's
So-
he's corny.
He is corny.
Oh my
Hello?
god. I don't care. I'm showing him
Is
this
he?
video. He is not corny. My baby is cool.
No, you're lying.
That's the big thing to him. I
What?
mean, he would work anywhere. to
And he
make
would work
money,
anywhere.
But
Yeah.
his point of
Yeah.
his life is that he's a husband and a father.
Yeah.
And he's darn good at it.
Like more, yes, he is. And more than this show, what defines me more and who I am and the decisions I make is more. I'm a wife and I homeschool. Like it consumes my life in terms of my priorities and you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I can understand, and I'm not using only myself. My husband works full time. He's an engineer, and he struggles with like, no, that does not define me.
Right.
Do you find that would you have an issue with somebody using that to define you?
Yeah, I think because I've worked so many jobs in my life, I could throw out any number and they might have a different viewpoint of me. Oh, you're a pizza delivery guy? Oh,
Yeah.
well then this. Oh, you're an excavator and you run heavy equipment? Oh, well that's something different.
Yeah.
And you're on the radio? Well, what kind of a station is it?
Mm-hmm.
I was going to say format, but normal people don't use that word. They're
Yeah.
just like, what kind of a station? What music
Yeah.
do you play?
Yeah.
Have you found that struggle?
Yeah, I have. When I first started, I started in promotions actually, and I think the thing that was frustrating for me was everybody thought I was a student because I looked young.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had to be like, well, I'm glad you think I look so young, but I'm actually a professional.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes it's the, oh, and then you would get the, oh, like, why are you doing this kind of thing? So I think the negative perception of what you do is what I fear personally
Yeah.
when it comes to jobs.
Yeah, and because people feel a right to give commentary on your job, which is
Yeah.
also awkward. But again, that's selfishness and pride coming in when we should be others focused.
Yeah.
But this is how wide and deep the command to love your neighbor really goes. It's even into these seemingly superfluous conversations. But truly, if we're going to live that out, we really got to care what people's answers are.
Right.
By the way, Michelle Fetty says maybe we feel slighted by being defined. Perhaps we're judging ourselves poorly, maybe being prideful.
Yeah.
Perhaps. I think some people share what they do for a living out of pride, which is how I feel when it's the, what do you do? And I'm really only asking to get yours over with so I can tell you what I do.
Mm-hmm.
There was a guy, I remember my 10-year anniversary, or my 10-year reunion. Sorry, Sarah, my reunion, not my anniversary. This guy walked around and he was kind of in the out group. He walked around to every little group of people standing and talking. He goes, hey, how you doing, everybody? Good. Yeah. And anyway, I got my PhD and I'm a professor at such and such place. Okay.
No.
Yeah, like he would say hello, but not really care about anyone responding. He was
yeah.
there to tell you what he did. Now that is rude,
Yeah.
prideful.
What if you're really excited about what you do
That's good.
Yeah.
and you define yourself by it? Is that, as a Christian, is that okay? Let's say you really are. There's some people who are super. Let's say you're like, what's that guy? The crocodile hunter.
Steve Irwin.
Yeah.
Steve Irwin. My son, his heart is just picture Steve Irwin with all the theatrical stuff. I can see him as an adult being defined, like it really defines who he is, like
Yeah.
as a little kid. And I can see him just like excited and sharing his stories. Is that bad? Especially if it's not ministry. Like let's say it's purely a job and you get paid for it and you're so excited, you bring it up in conversations. Is that bad?
No. The Bible says is to work heartily as if you're working for the Lord. To be passionate about your work and do your best is good.
Yeah.
So it's okay to define yourself by your job. That's not an issue.
Define yourself by your
By
yes.
what you do, by your career.
Is there a difference between defining yourself by it and liking it and being passionate about it?
Because you also you define yourself as a follower of Jesus and
Yeah. Oh well,
you
yeah.
know,
yeah.
maybe a husband and father. So there's other definitions, but that could be one
Right.
of his definitions.
Asada says, I have been treated differently when I work in blue collar as when I'm in white collar. Since I have student loans to pay back, I have both types of jobs. Why do we job shame people? Have you seen
Right.
that, Brian? Job
Oh,
shame?
yes. And it's silliness.
What does it look like? Because are some of us doing it and not realizing it?
Yeah. There's presumptions of that everyone is trying to be like you, okay? So let's just say someone's a plumber, which I think is a noble profession. I need a plumber in my house on a regular basis. I got all these people, trust me, we got problems with our pipes. So, but society would say it's a blue collar job, you know, are you a plumber so you can work your way up and do that? What if someone doesn't want to work their way up? What if they feel called to be exactly where they are?
Yeah.
Like I think we wrongly create American ideals for success and translate that into job shaming, like Asada says. Don't you think?
Yeah, I would agree.
Like, there's nothing wrong with somebody wanting to be a custodian at a school.
Yeah.
I've met
Yeah.
custodians that love their job.
Yeah.
And they work hard.
And they work really hard.
It's hard work.
They're not reaching for the next thing. They feel exactly where they're supposed to be. Why are they inherently more important than the teacher?
Right.
They're not.
Right. Yeah. And I think there's also the subtle shaming.
What do you mean?
Treating a person, like being, not really talking, let me see. Let's say you're in a group and the person's sort of not there, like you're not really engaging. And the minute you find out their title, now suddenly you're super interested. Like the flip side is bad, because then what you're telling the rest of the group or the rest of the people is, oh, this is important, this is valued, this is respected.
Yes.
You know, the PhD, and not even just PhD, CEO in the group, and, you know, getting
Right.
treated differently. That's, and I'm saying subtle because sometimes we could feel like, no, I'm giving out respect, or I'm just excited about them. But what you're really saying is, okay, what about everybody else? What about, like you said, the cafeteria worker? Are you just, I don't know, is that, would you say is that job shaming?
I think that, yes, I think it's a legit concern. If we're going to use this tactic and we're going to say that the article is flawed, and that the problem is we're just not interested in people's answers, we need to be sure that we're equally as putting an equal effort into being interested in people's answers. Like, because I found myself being, if someone says I'm a neurosurgeon, I perk up.
Yeah.
But do I perk up when someone says they work at UPS? I should,
Yeah.
because that person's there and they're doing something that's worth talking about.
Yeah. Right.
Tell me more about that. What is that like? Or do you, when it says fragile, do you really be careful or do you throw it? Or
Yeah.
how do you
What have your crazy stuff have you seen, man?
how do you find meaning in your work? Like,
Yeah.
what do you love about your job? What do you hate about it? I mean, there's plenty of
Yeah.
things to ask someone and show they have value.
That box of assault rifles last week was pretty weird.
Stop it.
Most, if not all, were drilled out, so they couldn't fire. But it was like it was coming apart, and there's this one sticking out. I'm like, called the supervisor. Is this okay?
Wow.
So
See, that's interesting. I wouldn't have known if you wouldn't have said that.
yeah.
What's up, Melody and Laura, Daniel? We have Rose and Tamar, Melody, Rachel, Arlene. I love your name. My best friend when I was growing up was Arlene.
Yeah.
Look at Laura's
Jen, I haven't seen your name. Laura says, I felt ashamed of being a server for almost 13 years while I was trying to get a teaching job. I felt I had to always explain, wow, that this job is temporary. Not only was I putting myself down, but anyone that works in
Yeah.
that industry.
That's a good point. We all know I couldn't handle being a server.
Right. Oh, yeah.
No, because you can't talk back. They
Right.
just have to take all the guff from the customers.
I'd probably drop stuff.
And I would wanna
Daniel, look
eat
at that.
everything.
Daniel, I think it bothers me because I feel like they're asking me how much money do I make? Like to get an idea on. Does that make
Yeah.
sense? Or he's asking that. Does
Sometimes
that
we
make
ask
sense?
for that reason. Somebody
That's
pulls up in a
awesome.
Corvette. Hey, what do you do for a living? Because what do we all do? You know those house hunting shows or whatever on those
Yes.
home improvement shows on HGTV? You see this couple who looks like average Joe America. They're like, well, our budget's $2 million, so
Yeah.
and I collect stamps.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
the first thing Sarah and I go, what does he do for a living?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we want to know that, don't we?
Yeah. In terms of what I wanted to go back to, are we good listeners and are we really interested in other people? What stops us and how, like, what would be our encouragement?
Well, how
Because if
about,
you don't know, if you're just like, oh, okay, cool, like, why should we be interested in, like, what stops us from not really stopping to say, oh yeah, how was your day today?
why couldn't it be, instead of the lead off, what do you do for a living? Have you read any good books lately? Do you have a hobby? What is it? well, one default is kind of, how about that tribe, or how about those brownies? You know, the sports and weather kind of are fallbacks also to stretch out the conversation.
And that brings up, maybe it's we don't know how to ask questions.
We don't.
You know, it's uncomfortable. You don't know how far to dig. So, for example, I'm thinking right now of new neighbors that I have, really cool, and I'm trying to find ways to, like, because they're like 10 years younger than me. Their babies are little. Our
So like
girls,
40-ish?
our girls are like best friends, and so we're like, what's that word? There's cordial. But I want to take it deeper. And so the obvious questions we've already covered is, oh, where did you grow up? Where did you go to school? And, you know, but to go deeper means, like, man, am I getting too personal? You don't want to make people uncomfortable. And I think that's probably why a lot of us struggle with, I'm interested. I just don't know, like, how do you ask questions without making people uncomfortable?
I think there's a secret to that. It's being vulnerable first.
Sharing information, now you're just talking about yourself.
But there's ways to do it with purpose. Like, if you want to connect with a neighbor, the fastest way is to ask for help.
Right. Right.
They feel valued when you ask for help.
Yeah.
You're saying, I need you. And so I think when you show a level of vulnerability and you're showing a level of interest and trust, that can create actual conversation.
With my neighbor, her oldest is like 5. I share vulnerability. I'm like, I was like, man, I'm like stumbling through these teenage years. And it was like, oh my gosh, she has to be like, because she sees all these kids, and then I'm older and have older kids. So I was like, wow, she probably thinks like, what the heck, what are you doing? Because I'm supposed to look. Or it's, you know, like you're supposed, you got teens that are driving, and I told her, like, I hope he doesn't realize that I'm literally learning as I guide him.
No, but see, that was a game changer for me. That was a game changer for me to find out that everybody doesn't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
It was like a release for me
Yes.
to say that.
Heather, I want to give a shout out to Heather. First of all, I really like, this woman is like super intelligent, has a great kids. She has a bunch of boys, and she's a homeschooler. And she says, I love you guys. You are the best morning show. You all work really well together.
Stop.
She's new in town, relatively speaking, in Cleveland, and her family's amazing.
Welcome.
So thank you,
Yes.
Heather. Yes, Callie says, if someone's passionate about their job, they should be able to openly talk about their job. I think it's all a heart issue. I know I'm passionate about my job, but I don't like saying, oh, I'm a host of a morning show. Because then it'll shift the conversation. It'll make it about me, and it can also come off like braggy. So I don't say that.
So how do you avoid it? What do you say? This is fun for me because I have a long trail I go on.
You have a long trail. I say, oh, I'm in communications, or I'll focus on the homeschooling thing. And it's not that I'm not passionate, and it's not that I'm trying to hide it. I just don't want it to be like, oh, as soon as they do that, you're in a whole...
That's biblical
then it's
humility.
Like,
That's valuable biblical humility.
But I want to be honest. I don't want to be like, oh, why didn't you just say you were... Do you see what I'm saying? I don't want to hijack the conversation. Now, if we go deep enough and it comes up, then let's focus on like, oh my gosh, guess what topics we covered? Because I care about what I do, not where I'm at in terms of like, oh, I'm a co-host.
How hard do you work to hide it? Like you say, you're in communications, and then they go, oh, okay, what kind of communications? Then what do you say? Like, how long does it take you to get to, I host a morning show?
I've gotten as close as saying, I work for a radio show. You know, but once you put a title to me in my heart, I just want to make sure, like, it's not about me. It's like my husband saying his position. He does, Len is good with this. He'll say, oh, I do maintenance. I'm a maintenance engineer. Really what he does is he runs the whole building.
He drives around the golf cart,
he doesn't have to say all of that. Once you go there, it's like, now you're talking about who you are and titles. It's like saying, oh, you know, I got a PhD. Versus see, I research whatever.
It proves my point, though. Hardly anyone cares enough to ask enough questions to find out.
Right.
It's on a very rare occasion that anyone ever gets me to say what I do.
Tamar just touched on what you said. We're not responsible for how people respond to what we do. That's a reflection of them, not you. So you saying who you are and where you work, or me, how they react, right? So you could say, I'm the host of a morning.
But it's hard to explain, but when you have something that society views as a cool job, it shuts things down.
Yeah.
And it gets weird.
Yeah.
Now, and I don't think there is such a thing. I think there's lots of really interesting jobs out there. Like, I like watching the show Dirty Jobs. Well, it's fascinating what those people do.
Show.
But they don't have what society defines as something cool. So we try to avoid it for that reason because it gets weird.
Yeah.
But I do reveal it occasionally when people seem genuinely interested in me as a person.
Lance, what's up, Lance? Hi. I love your picture, by the way. She says, yes, I have felt...
Lance is a guy, by the way.
Sorry. Sorry. That's my fault. He says, yes, I have felt ashamed for having an English degree because... English degree. Do you know the kind of classes he had to take?
He probably read Chaucer. I can't even find it in the library.
There was
English degree because I have basically been a part-timer employee since I got my degree, taking minimum wage jobs and being unemployed since I got the degree. He's a sub-teacher. That's another hard job.
Yeah.
When reading the obituaries in the papers, the first thing they state is what their jobs were, which doesn't really describe the person and their hearts. Yeah. What do you think about that? That's deep. The obituaries?
Yeah.
But see, isn't that why you don't share what you do because society views it as cool? And you think that Lance has equal value as you do in society? But he's right. I mean, I think obituaries do start with that. But others have made the point, we spend so much time of our day that partially defines. Just like you spend like half your day sleeping or whatever. I mean, what? Ron sleeps.
And some people, like, you could be genuinely proud of your mom because she was a nurse her whole life. And if you're using your job to have God use your gifts to serve, wherever it is, it could be a doctor, it could be a teacher, it could be an engineer with machines. Why can't you, like, why are we saying it's not necessarily great to have that as part of your obituary? That's like the way God used you while you were here.
I don't think it's inherently bad in the obituary. It shows what our culture is like, but
it's maybe
I feel bad that a guy like that, like Lance, feels lesser than, because I think actually it's easier for me to have a conversation with him with that degree. Then I remember there was a guy at an event we went to. It was at Northfield Baptist Church actually, and there was a guy who told me he's an actuary.
What's that?
I know. He got pumped up because I was asking a million questions to learn more about that because I was genuinely interested.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of work.
Yeah.
Know what an actuary does. It's very abstract, blah, blah, blah. But what Lance does, or what his degree is, that's interesting.
And what he had to do to get there?
Yeah. You're awesome, Lance.
Yes, you are. It is, Daniel says, let's face it, it is your status.
That's how many people view it.
Yeah.
The Christian should not view it that way.
No.
And I would even say it's your identity. Even though as Christians we know our identity is in Christ, but it's easy to make what other people think as your identity. And how do you change that?
Yeah. My favorite thing about the whole conversation is to be curious about other people. And
that's what we need to do.
Yeah.
I think the Christian has an obligation. I mean, the scripture says to consider others as more important than yourselves. And if that's the case, when we get into these conversations, it's not wrong to ask what you do. It's wrong to ask the question and not care about the answer.
Yeah.
You gotta genuinely have care about the other, the neighbor.
Yeah.
Be curious about them.
Absolutely.
Challenge yourself to see how long can I get this person.
That's the best
to
challenge.
Talk about what they do to show that I care
Take that
about
with you. I'm taking it with me. I like that. That's a good challenge. Oh, I love that. Michelle, great way to close us up. What if my job were the smoke machine operator for worship?
Hayes, Michelle.
That's awesome.
If you don't know why that's funny, you missed the show today, live show. You got to listen in every morning, 6 to 9. Either download the Moody Radio mobile app, wherever you are, to listen 6 to 9 Eastern, or tune in if you're in Northeast Ohio to Moody Radio Cleveland.
Yeah, we love y'all.
Yes.
What's up, Lance and Michelle and Jennifer, John, Asada, Astra, Arlene, Rebecca, Beverly. Hi, Jen. And Rachel, Melody, Giselle. That's my sister. What's up, sister?
Is that Rachel Scott from Better Than Blended?
Yes, sir.
What up, Rachel?
Oh,
Hi,
hey.
Rachel. Laura, thank you for joining us. And Rose Chapman. Yes, the angry face for Brian. Yeah.
All right,
Bye,
you
guys.
See you tomorrow.
Oh man, smoke
Smoke machine
machines.
operator, that's cool.
That's the best.